Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of my knitting podcast. I am definitely going to make today's episode a lot more concise than the last one. I know it ran very long, but there was a lot of Christmas stuff in there, so it's like kind of special circumstances. But I'm hoping to kind of post more frequently, so it's not going to be so lengthy. I'm also really hoping you can't hear my dryer right now, but I'm trying to film while I have daylight, and I didn't really time it out correctly. So if you can hear whatever has a zipper on it banging around in there, I'm terribly sorry. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm very excited. I do have a couple finished objects to share, which I've been more excited since starting this podcast to get finished or to get objects finished because I'm excited to share them. I actually have kind of a platform to share my knitting things. So the first one I don't have with me because it was the final Christmas gift that I was working on, but I'll put a little picture of it right here. It's a pair of socks that I made for my grandpa, which if you watched my last episode, you know that I was making one for both my grandparents, and we always have our Christmas like later on, like the first week of January, just because it seems like people are less busy then. So that was Christmas technically just in January, but I already gifted those and they seem to really like them, and I've seen them since and I asked them if they fit and they said, oh, we haven't put them on, they're so pretty, like we're not gonna wear them. I was like, no, just wear them, I can always make more, like just enjoy the present. So we'll see if they ever get use, but they seem to really like them. I also forgot to mention with his socks what pattern I used. I had this Patent just socks and slippers basics book that I got when I first wanted to try knitting socks that I followed out of this one. They have patterns for fingering, DK, and I think it's just like a bulky weight. And I followed the DK pattern and it made quite a bit of sense to me. It was my first sock knitting pattern ever, so I felt pretty good about it. But that was my first finished object. My next one I've been working on for a few months now, and I was so excited to get it done. My goal was to get it done before the end of the year, and I did by like 8 hours. So I did finish it in 2023, barely. It is what I have deemed my Kermit sweater, which I've talked about a few times now, but I'm finally done with, and I love this sweater so much. I finished it, it's probably been about 2 weeks now, and I have worn it probably half a dozen times already. It is so comfy and cozy. I'm so happy with it. And if you haven't been here, this is the reason I call it my Kermit sweater. I saw this picture on Instagram and I just felt inspiration. I felt like seeing Kermit so cozy was something that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be this cozy. And so I went digging through my stash. This is all stash yarn minus like 1/3 of a skein that I had to buy to match one I already had because it was running out. But other than that, it's all stash yarn. This was my first ever brioche knit item, which I am super proud of. This is one of those sweaters that I kind of finally feel like I'm getting good at knitting because it's just all coming together. Yeah, I was really happy with it. Also, it's reversible, so you've got the like darker green dominant side and the kind of whitish dominant side. I don't have a pattern for this to share. I just kind of came up with it on my own. I'm sorry. If you go watch my video about how to make sweaters without using a pattern, I talk about this one, but essentially all I did, this one was kind of weird because I was nervous to knit boucle, or not boucle, brioche stitch in the round while I was doing it for the first time. So I started in the back, actually. I started in the back as just a flat panel, and I went all the way up the back and I cast off stitches for the neckline, and then I like just kept going around the shoulder. So technically the front's like upside down, which I don't know if that matters, but then I just kept going down the front and then like cast on as I got to like where I want the neckline shape to sit. And then for the sleeves, I did them a little differently than I usually do. I've noticed with some of my sweaters, because I really like the kind of boxy drop shoulder shape, but I don't like the crease you get in your armpit. And so I was trying to avoid that. So I did some very slight shoulder shaping where essentially I knit this as a separate piece. I didn't pick up stitches, but I cast on, I don't know, I think like 18 or 20 stitches. And then when I got to the end of every round, I added two until I had kind of this like sloping shape. And then I did, this is like my new favorite thing, I did a double fold cuff as well as a double fold collar because I did the collar first and I loved it so much that I thought I want to continue this. So the sleeves are a little cropped, but I did this really bulky, oh my gosh, so soft hem. It's got like a probably at least like a fingering weight Surrey alpaca. Look how fluffy it is. Oh my goodness. It is so soft. It's so soft. I wore this to one of our family Christmases and I was sitting next to my husband and he was like, "You're shedding all over me." Cause like I can't tell because like it just all matches. But he had black pants on and they were covered in little white hairs. So you have to be careful what you pair it with. I've worn it with jeans, which I wear like mostly light wash jeans. And I've also paired it with a couple like silky skirts, which stuff doesn't really stick to. So it hasn't been an issue for me, but I guess depending on what you like to wear, keep that in mind. But I'll never give up the fluffiness of Surrey. So that is my most recent finished object and I am just so flipping pleased with it. I love it. Now that is all the finished objects I have. The next thing that I want to move on to, which is current projects. I really only have one to talk about. I've been trying to be a little bit more organized with my projects because I feel like it's really easy for me to get like 1,000 things started at once and then I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of projects that I have. So I've been trying to be more focused with having maybe only 1 or 2 big projects going and just kind of easing into another one over time. Also, it is amazing how much faster knitting goes when you're only doing like one main thing. So I mentioned this one really briefly in the last video. Sorry, it's buried under some stuff over here. I don't remember if I had a name for it back then, but I'm calling it my candy stripe sweater because it just reminds me of candy stripes. So when I last mentioned it, I was using fingering weight and I was using tiny size 2 needles because I wanted the fabric to be really dense. Well, I got all the ribbing done in that. I got probably like 4 or 5 inches into the sweater and I just could not shake the feeling that like this is just not going to feel like a sweatshirt material. It's not going to be dense enough. I just couldn't stop feeling like I wasn't going to be happy with it because that's one thing that I've really tried to focus on a lot more this year is picking the right yarn and density to go with the style of sweater that I want. And so I frogged the whole thing. I didn't even take a picture of it. I don't know why, but whatever. I frogged the whole thing because I remembered I had 2 skeins of DK weight undyed yarn from Nomad Yarn when I bought it, I don't even know, over a year ago, 2 years ago? I don't know, over a year ago, I think. Let's hope it hasn't been 2 years. That doesn't feel like that long, but whatever. I had 2 skeins of undyed yarn from them that were DK weight, and I realized everything else I was using was fingering that I knew I would have plenty of, so I'm holding everything else double, which I feel way better about the density of it, and I actually feel like it helps the colors show up a lot better because instead of my stitches being like eensy, they're a lot more visible because they're just a larger size, and I'm really excited for this. So this is what I've been working on almost singularly on its own. Yeah, I paused on this for a while because I was trying to finish up those socks, but other than that, I've really only been working on this, so it's kind of hard to see. I like to do bottom up because I think that that is easiest for me to kind of just make plans as I go. This is just a self-drafted pattern. This is my inspiration pick. It is an ad I got on Pinterest for a sweater that's like $600, I think. And I decided I could make that and it would actually be cheaper than the sweater. So that's what I'm basing it off of. I want to actually make it a quarter zip style, which I've never done before, so I'm a little nervous about it, but I think it's going to be okay. So thus far, I've gotten a lot of the body done. I'm very excited. It looks real lumpy because, like, obviously I haven't blocked it, but this is why I'm calling it my candy stripe. It's still all rolled up. I'm trying to show you all the stripes here. This is why I'm calling it my candy stripe, because all these bright colored, somewhat colorwork stripes just kind of make me think of candy. So candy stripe sweater. This is where I split for my armholes, and I like to work up the back because that's going to be more significant than the front because you've got to get up to your shoulders. I feel like it just takes longer, so I like to kind of get that out of the way. So I split. You can see I split not that long ago for armholes, and I've just gotten one more row done on the back. I'm just trying to have a lot of fun with this. I've been using up different like minis and things, and it's a great like scrap busting type project because if you just have any random fingering weight solid color yarn laying around, put it in. So that's what I've been doing. I am really, really pleased with it. It is feeling really fantastic. I'm planning on making it a drop shoulder. I'm probably going to make the shoulder somewhat kind of like angular so that it doesn't come out to a point, it's not squared off, but that they're sloping a little bit, not a lot. The one thing I'm concerned about, and I feel like I'm a broken record and this is never an issue, but it's running out of yarn. I said this so much with my Kermit sweater and I didn't run out of anything I thought I would, but I do feel like it's more likely in this one. This is my first skein of white and I only have one other one. And I have a lot left to go. So I think I'm gonna run out. I have a couple things that I'm gonna do. So first off, the collar is gonna be knit entirely separately. If you notice from that picture, it's got kind of like a separate rib section that goes around the zipper itself. So the zipper isn't touching like the body of the sweater. There's like an insert piece that goes in there. I don't know how to explain this, but if you saw the picture, this makes sense. But I'm going to be knitting that piece entirely separately, and I am going to make it like a double fold piece, which I am going to make with the outside with a fingering weight undyed yarn that I have, just because I think that it's fine if it's not as thick because it's double fold. And on the inside I'm going to use, it's like this pink that's in this square right here, because this is the zipper that I'm going to use for the quarter zip portion. And if you look and compare, they match pretty fantastically. I'm pretty happy with that. If you've heard me talk about it before, I've been trying not to buy anything that I already have, and I have a lot of zippers, so I think I can be happy with that match right there. So the color will be entirely different yarn, so I don't have to worry about having enough white for that. I don't know, I'm just gonna see as far as I can get. I could get more. It's just, it comes in a 10 pack. And as I'm going to talk about in a little bit, I've been really trying not to buy yarn, and I don't want to have to buy a 10 pack for one skein. I do think No Bad Yarn sells them as single skein, but it's so much more expensive that it makes way more sense to just buy the 10 pack, which I was trying not to do, but we'll see. I'm gonna see how far I can get on this one skein, because I feel like a lot of times they just kind of keep going, like they last a lot longer than you think, although this is pretty tiny. I don't know, we're gonna see how far I can get. I also considered making the sleeves entirely multicolored, like with no white stripes in between, and maybe just doing white cuffs, but I don't know if that would look just too messy and busy. I don't know, we'll see how far I get on that. I might have to buy some yarn for that. But that is pretty much it with current projects. I do have a lot in my head that I'm thinking about kind of all the time. I want to get to acquisitions. I don't have a lot, I promise. A lot of this is just like finishing up Christmas. I mentioned that I have like late Christmas with some of my family, and so most of this is from that. So the first book I actually did by myself. I got a gift card from work to Amazon, and it entirely covered this book called Knitivation. I've seen a couple other people talk about it. I first saw it on Instagram and was just immediately so excited about it. If you haven't seen it, it's essentially, and I'll show you kind of a close-up of the front cover, it's a bunch of different colorwork stitches that are like a range between really silly and fun and really geometric. Some are really artsy and unique, and then it also has some patterns in it, which I didn't realize. It's got a pattern for a sweater and a hat and a pair of gloves, and I think it's like 200 and some different stitches, or different stitch patterns. I don't remember exactly, but there are just absolutely gobs in here, and there's a lot of really cute ones. Like, it has a lot of fruit patterns, like these little cherries or little Christmassy things. I'm not gonna sit here and show you all of them, but there are so many cute ones and seasonal ones and animals and fruits and foods, and one of them's pieces of toast, which I think is so cute. Okay, this is another one of my favorites. The little fat or corporate fat cat. Are you kidding me? How do you even come up with that? It's so cute. So I was really excited to get this, and I've got a couple different plans. They're really just vague ideas in my head, so I haven't talked about them yet, but they'll circle back around, so just keep this in the back of your mind. And so I bought this myself. My family Christmas, though, I had asked for a couple books specifically, and when I first was looking at that one, I didn't realize it's a second edition, so I asked for the first edition, which is this alternate. It's written by the same person, and it's got a lot of similar, not similar stuff, but like similar categories. There's a lot of geometric, there's a lot of artistic, there's a lot of silly ones, and I just love them all, honestly. They're really interesting, and I think there are so many that I've like seen patterns before that I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I've thought of things that like, oh, I could put that in a sweater, but it is really time consuming to write them out yourself or to figure out the math behind them. So having like pre-made charts that you can just follow along with is so helpful. And it's not something you have to have your phone open for. That drives me crazy. So I'm really excited to use these. The other book that I got, I am maybe even more excited about. I'll probably be using in the more near future. I first heard about this book's existence from Veronica Lindbergh, or Kutova Kika, and she talked about it when she was, I think, writing her book initially, and saying that she had found this book in Japan and had found it like very useful, and that it had like tons of really interesting designs in it. And I thought, that does look really cool, but at the time I felt pretty not confident about my skills. So it's called Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible, and it is tons of like pretty complicated stitch patterns. I mostly got it because I really want to kind of up my cable stitch game. I know how to cable stitch. I know some really basic stitches. My like Knit Stitch Bible has a lot of really basic patterns in it, but a couple issues that I had is that book, I'm just going to show you. It'll make more sense. Okay, I've referenced this book a few times. This is who I mean. I really like this book. I've gotten a lot of use out of it. Obviously, it's got 750 knitting stitches. Like, how could you not get a lot of use out of it? And they've got an entire section on cables, once I get to it here. And this is like essentially what I learned to knit cables out of. So I've really liked it, and I've used it a good amount, and they've got like gobs of different types and a lot of really different interesting ones. I had my husband pick me one. I was just trying to practice them one time, and I was like, pick one out for me to practice, and he picked that one, which was incredibly challenging. So I really like this book. It's got dozens of cable knit patterns. The issue that I have with it is that it's a little bit hard to use in different situations. So, for example, I'm going to show this to you far away, so I'm not showing you what's in a book that you should purchase if you want to use. It is step-by-step instructions, which can be nice. I think this is very beginner-friendly, which is very nice. But the issue is, these are all written assuming that you're just going back and forth, which means if you want to knit a cable in the round, you have to read each line backwards to get the steps in the correct order, if that makes sense. So for instance, if you've knit cables before, you know, on the flip side, usually you're just knitting and purling. So you would have to like not only read those in the opposite direction, but also do the opposite thing of that. I don't know if any of this is making sense. Essentially, it's not charted cables. There are a few in here. Once you get to some of the more complicated ones, they've got like a small chart to give you a visual of what it looks like. But for the most part, it is step-by-step, all written out instructions. Can be incredibly useful and helpful. I think it's a great beginner cable knit type setup. However, when you get to knitting bigger cables or things that are in the round especially, I found that it was really incredibly intimidating at first, but it is actually easier to knit off of the cable charts. And they're terrifying if you've never actually used one, because they're just, they're difficult. They are. I'll say it. But once you figure it out, it is so much easier to use, because it doesn't matter what format you're knitting it in. It's just changing how you're reading it, essentially. And it actually favors knitting in the round, in my opinion, because it's written with the whole right side facing you. So if you're knitting in the round, you just keep reading it the correct way. If you're knitting back and forth, all you have to do is like flip-flop the knit and purl stitches. But I really wanted this, not only because it's got a lot of really complicated patterns in it, but because it's got these charted patterns, and that's singularly how it works, is charted patterns, and I wanted to use those. I did actually start practicing one because I thought I've only done like really basic cables, so I can show you how far I got in a little swatch. I was doing this one, and I know it's still just like cables. I'm not doing lace or anything or mosaic knitting, but I'm knitting the little chart, which I should have done it a few stitches bigger because it's like right on the edge, but I think it's looking how it's supposed to. So I'm pretty excited about it. I have plans for this. Now, I have one more acquisition I want to talk about, and then I'll talk about my plans. I think I mentioned this in my last video. I really can't remember. I got some Christmas money and I used it on yarn, and it arrived. So I'm gonna show it to you today. It is from Soho, which is a company I have always desired to buy from, but they're a little pricey, so I've just never gotten around to purchasing anything from them, and I finally did. They had a sale on their yarn called the Good Wool, which is a sport weight 100% wool. Yes. And it is just regular wool. It is not superwash wool. I wanted this for a couple reasons. First off, I've been leaning away from superwash wool a little bit more. If you don't know the difference, essentially superwash wool is treated so that it won't felt. It basically, I think it takes off the barbs that are typically on wool fibers that make them stick together, which it is typically meant for knitting socks, which makes a lot of sense because you have a lot of friction in socks. You usually have to launder those quite a bit. So that kind of situation I totally get. But I have a lot of superwash that I've bought for making garments, just because a lot of indie dyers mostly only sell superwash wool, I think because that's what sells the best. So I totally hear that, but I wanted to buy some wool that was not superwash. I just wanted some regular wool, also because I do feel like it tends to wear a little bit better. I know that felting is not considered a good thing, but when I compare a superwash sweater that I've made to one that is not superwash, I think the non-superwash actually looks better, because superwash just kind of gets fluffy looking in my opinion, and maybe it's just the yarns that I've used, but inevitably hairs are going to kind of stray from the yarn strands. If it's non-superwash, it'll still stick to the body of the sweater, so your sweater won't start looking fluffy. If it's superwash, it won't. It'll stick out. So I tend to think that wool sweaters wear better over time, and that I kind of just enjoy the feel of the fabric a little bit better. It feels more like wool and less like a synthetic in my opinion. So I wanted some wool that was non-superwash. That was a long explanation, but I found Pearl Soho had a sale and they have what is called the good wool. And I was a little anxious about it because if you've ever bought wool before, usually the cheaper it is, the scratchier it is. And this is typically, I think, like $13.50, maybe $14 a skein, which already isn't bad. And it was marked down to $11.50, which is even better. But I was a little concerned, is it gonna be really scratchy? But I went for it. I decided to take the plunge. My Christmas money paid for all of it. So I got yarn to match one of the Christmas yarns that I talked about last time. It is, I think, O Tannenbaum by Ruby and Roses. I'm not gonna get it out because it's buried back there, but it's red and green and brown. Like, it's a very Christmassy, earthy Christmas kind of thing. So I got some yarn to match that. So I got one, I don't know if I can see the colors on these, hickory nut. Just a very nice kind of gray brown. I think this is one of their undyed, as well as this heirloom white. I wish I would have got more of this because I feel like you can never have too much white yarn. And then to really up the ante on the Christmas aspect, I got 3 of these fern greens, which I really love this color. It looks like Kermit. And 3 of Roma tomato, which I think is a very earthy Christmas red. So that's the batch that I got. I 100% know this is way too much for one sweater. I have a couple different ideas, so we'll see. But I have plans for making like an actual Christmas sweater next year, and I'm not doing brioche stitch, so I can actually get it done by Christmas, and I would like to use this. I was also interested in this because it's a sport weight, and I feel like I've been leaning away from the fingering weight a little bit more and a little bit more towards the sport. I feel like that's kind of what I've been more interested in. And I've got to say, I'm somebody who's pretty picky about scratchiness. If a yarn is not soft, I'm not even interested in knitting with it. Like, if it's scratchy, I don't even want to feel it on my hands. And I really like this. So I might look for it in the future as well, because it just feels like a really nice classic wool, and it's really affordable. So I was very excited to find this. So if you're looking for a non-superwash sport weight wool that comes in a lot of different colors, the good wool is my recommendation. I haven't worked with it yet, so I don't know how it works up, but I mean, it looks and feels amazing. So I'm totally happy with it so far. Now, all of that are all my acquisitions. I do still have my Barbie yarn incoming from Wool & Works. That'll be in soon, I'm sure. Whenever is fine. My future plans currently with the things that I have, I want to circle back to that Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible book. Now, I haven't picked out a pattern or anything, but I wanted that book with a specific yarn in mind. And this yarn is very much not me. I'm gonna say it. I know that I am known for bright colors and multicolored. If you can see the yarn behind me or what I'm wearing or any of the other yarn that I've shown, I do not lean towards solid colors, and I don't lean towards neutral tones. It's just not anything that ever interests me. But I went to this wool festival in September and I didn't have very much money. And so I was trying to be smart and just like make a lap of all the booths and try and see what things that interest me and maybe what yarn I would be interested in buying, because I was trying to really stick to a budget. Well, this one just like called to me. We made eye contact and that was it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I left. I said like, no, I don't need this. And I walked away and I came back. I couldn't get it out of my head. It's like, that's like one of those things you're supposed to do when you're shopping, is leave something. And if you're still thinking about it, maybe you actually do want it. It's not an impulse. And I had to come back, and it's this beautiful champagne tone 100% alpaca. And if she looks big, that's because she is. A normal 100-gram skein is about like 3.2 ounces, I think, and this one's 8 ounces. So she's like over 2 regular skeins of yarn. So I only got 2 of these because I think this is going to be plenty to make a sweater with. And I know this doesn't look like me at all. I really have been interested in knitting more things that are textured and you can actually see that texture. I love multicolor and things like that, but a lot of times you can't knit a lot of texture on things that are multicolored because it gets lost. You're either going to be able to see the color really well or the texture really well, and probably not both. So I had been thinking about it and I saw this and it just, I cannot explain to you how cushiony it is. And it is called the color Champagne. I don't know where it's from, and that's something that haunts me. I want to go back to this wool festival just for more of this. They had a whole stand of like all slightly different shades of this beautiful 100% alpaca, and I think if they're at that wool festival that I am certainly going back to this upcoming September or whenever it is this year, I am making a beeline for their stand, because honestly, I could just buy this. Like, this is maybe my favorite thing that I got from that day. I got some Surrey alpaca that was really amazing too, but I just love it. I love it. And in my last video, I talked about an acquisition that I had, which was buying this undyed Surrey alpaca from Nomad. And I'm thinking these two held together, I cannot imagine a softer sweater. I know you can't feel these, but like, just look at how fluffy they are. Imagine the softness. It's gonna be amazing. So I want to hold these together. I am a little concerned about a couple things. First off, I know that alpaca stretches, and I've been trying to do some research to figure out, like, can you plan for the amount of stretch that you're gonna have? I did learn something new. I learned why alpaca stretches, and it's not that it stretches necessarily more than wool, but if your wool sweater gets stretched out and you wash it, it usually kind of springs back to shape because sheep's wool is like really crimpy and curly. Alpaca is a lot straighter. So if it stretches out, it pretty much just stays at that shape. So I'm a little unsure of what to plan for. I think I need to knit like a pretty decent sized swatch, which I was gonna do anyways, because if I'm planning like a really textural sweater, I wanna have a good idea of what it's gonna look like with this yarn, because obviously these both have like quite a bit of bloom to them. And so it's gonna need to be something that shows texture quite a bit. This is probably gonna knit up as a sport weight, I'm gonna say, yeah. So it's gonna need to be something like pretty sizable as far as texture goes. So I'm probably just gonna knit a swatch and actually wet block it, which I never do, and just see how much it stretches then and kind of go off of that. But that's probably my next cast on that I'm really excited about, because it's just so soft. I want to put it on immediately, especially after finishing my Kermit sweater that had a ton of Surrey in it. I truly know what softness feels like now. It's really amazing. The only other future plan that I have is also linked to my Barbie yarn that is on the way. I don't think I've talked about this at all. So when I very first started buying off of indie dyers, I really had no idea what I was doing. One of the first people I bought off of was Superg Fibers, which I've talked about before. This is one of her like very earliest items. She just had like a random skein sale, and I bought this really having no idea what I was getting because I didn't know what I was doing. But I've untwisted it, so it's like a little hard to see. But it is this skein of boucle yarn, which I feel like I've been seeing all over the place. I feel like it's getting really trendy, and I kind of love that I have plans for a boucle sweater, but I've had this one off forever. And in my intentions of using up what I have, I decided I need to figure out a way to use this. So I brought it with me to the same wool festival and thought, let's see if I can find something. I don't feel like I see this yarn very often, but we'll see. And I carried it around all day, and I finally came up to this booth. I had seen one other booth have boucle. It was like almost all the way through the festival, and I came to this booth, and they are called, I'm probably gonna mispronounce this, Aisling? I'm just gonna show it to you. This is the yarn company, and they had a little display of boucle yarn, and I could not get over how perfect this was, because not only is it a yellow that vibes with like the yellow in this, but also it's got speckly colors that vibe with the speckly colors in this. How perfect. This color, by the way, is called Remains of the Day, but they only had 2 of these, so I only got 2 of these, and they're only 240 yards. So, and I think this is like exactly the same. Yeah. So I was a little worried that 3 of these wasn't going to be enough. So in the Barbie yarn sale, I bought a like light pink, sort of like this. I think it's the Greta pink, but I only got 1 skein of that, but I think 4 skeins, which means we would have like about 1,000 yards. I think that's gonna be enough because it's considered, I think, like a DK. Yeah, I think that's gonna be enough. But I was also thinking a like cable knit sweater would be really cute out of this, but I haven't decided. We're gonna see, because I was considering, and I just cannot decide in my mind if this is like worth the trouble, but I was considering doing a cable knit sweater where the actual cables are like intarsia, so it would really make them pop, because I know that this texture is almost like a teddy texture. It kind of like eats any sort of stitch definition. So if I wanted to do cables, I would have to do some sort of like actual color differentiation, which I'm not against, but I think I need to see the pink and like lay them all out together to see what is going on. But that's one of my future plans. I would definitely say the alpaca is coming first, because she's just such a dream. She's such a dream. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is I've mentioned that I want to stop buying so many craft products, specifically yarn, but I know I've heard people talk about before that buying yarn and using yarn are 2 different hobbies, and I could not agree more. I feel like in the first year and a half of really getting back into knitting since being an adult, I more focused on the hobby of buying yarn, and now I'm trying to kind of shift to focus on the hobby of using the yarn, because it's just like more enjoyable to to buy yarn when I don't feel that guilt of like, oh, I have so much at home. So I'm trying to use some up. I'm making an exception to my rule, actually making 2 exceptions, but then that's it. The first exception is vacation, because my husband and I are going on vacation. I'm so excited. We have never been on vacation as a married couple because we got married in the year of COVID, and so we didn't want to go on vacation when everything was closed, and then just like life has happened and we haven't had a chance to go on vacation since. So we are going on vacation this spring, and I'm incredibly excited, and we already have plans to stop at least 1 local yarn shop that we stopped at in June. It's called Loopville. It is in, I can never remember. It's either Kentucky or Tennessee. I think I said Kentucky last time, but I think it's in Tennessee. But it was really cute and really nice, and they had some really nice, I'm probably gonna mispronounce this, Barocco, something like that. It was an alpaca wool blend that I want more of, and some 100% alpaca that I want some more of. So we're gonna stop there and see whatever else they have, and maybe other local yarn stores. And then also, my in-laws have been planning a trip to Maine for like, I don't even know, probably 4 years. They have had like a mantra of 2024, we're going to Maine. And so we are going to Maine this summer as well. We have not been on vacation before, and now we're doing 2 in the span of like 3 months, which is very exciting. I'm very excited for it. But I'm fully expecting to find some local yarn shops because I feel like, especially on the East Coast where it's colder, there's more yarn and things. So I expect to buy some yarn. I know, but I have kind of made a rule about not buying yarn online anymore. Not that it's across the board, because I still will at some point. I just know I will. I'm trying my best, but I so much more enjoy buying yarn in person. And I know that that's not like possible for a lot of people, and I know that the internet is so helpful in so many ways and connects all of us, and it's awesome to be able to support small businesses from really far away, but it is so much more enjoyable to go to a wool festival or a little local yarn shop and find some really special skeins that you can feel and look at the colors in person and make connections with people in person than just looking at a picture online and like hitting add to cart. So that's been one of the easiest ways to actually cut down on my yarn spending. Is if I ever find myself like shopping online on somebody's website where they have yarn for sale, I always just kind of stop and I'm like, you know what, if I'm gonna spend the money, I'd rather do in person, and I want to save it for a local yarn shop or a wool festival. So that's what I've really been trying to do, and so far, I know we're only like 2 weeks into this year, but I haven't bought any yarn this year, even though I might for that sweater in case I run out. We'll see. But that's kind of the plan. I overall had a goal of making my stash smaller, but I believe that is all I wanted to talk about today. And I hope to, like I said, do these more regularly because I just have too much to talk about all the time, and I'm really good at talking. So that is where I'm going to stop it today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you back here again sometime soon.